The knock on the front door came at exactly 11:03 p.m. I glanced at the clock, expecting perhaps a neighbor with an emergency or a late package delivery. Instead, when I opened the door, four oversized suitcases rolled across my polished hardwood floor before I had the chance to say a single word. Standing behind them was my husband's daughter, Victoria Hayes. Beside her stood her husband, Ryan Carter, holding another suitcase and smiling, as if they had just checked into a luxury hotel. Victoria didn't greet me. She didn't ask if it was a good time. She simply stepped inside. "Move those bags to the guest room, Ryan." I blinked. "What are you doing?" Before either of them answered, Daniel walked out from the hallway. My husband wouldn't meet my eyes. "They're going to stay with us for a little while." "A little while?" Victoria laughed. "Oh, don't worry. You'll barely notice us." That was the first lie. Ryan wheeled another suitcase toward the staircase while Victoria casually placed a folder on the dining table. "What's this?" "Our house rules."
Ich zerrte her.
"Our what?" She folded her arms. "Since 4 adults are living together now, everyone needs responsibilities." Daniel still refused to look at me. I slowly opened the folder. Monday through Sunday. Breakfast at 7. Laundry every Tuesday and Friday. Bathrooms cleaned every Wednesday. Dinner prepared before 6. Kitchen spotless before bedtime. At the bottom was one sentence highlighted in yellow. "Helen is responsible for maintaining the household because she is retired." I looked up. "You expect me to work for you?"
Victoria shrugged.
"Well, you're home all day." Daniel finally spoke. "Helen. Maybe just until they get back on their feet." I studied my husband's face. 21 years of marriage. 21 years of birthdays, holidays, hospital visits, promotions, setbacks, dreams. Yet tonight he couldn't even defend me inside my own home. I closed the folder. "Fine." Victoria smiled with satisfaction. "I knew you'd understand." She mistook silence for surrender. That was her second mistake. The next morning started before sunrise. At 6:15 I walked downstairs to find Victoria already sitting at my kitchen island drinking imported coffee from one of my favorite mugs. "My coffee tastes better when someone else buys it," she joked. Ryan laughed. Daniel pretended not to hear. Victoria pushed a grocery list across the counter. "We're almost out of almond milk." "I don't drink almond milk." "We do." She smiled sweetly. "So could you pick some up today?" "I have plans." "They can wait," Ryan added without looking up from his phone. "You've got plenty of free time." I looked toward Daniel. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Instead, he reached for another piece of toast. That afternoon I drove to the grocery store. Not because they ordered me to, because I wanted to see how far they intended to go. When I returned, every family photograph in the living room had disappeared. Pictures from our wedding, photos of my parents, vacation memories, even the portrait of Daniel and me celebrating our 20th anniversary. All gone. Victoria was arranging oversized modern artwork against the wall. "It looks more contemporary." "Where are my pictures?" "Oh." She waved casually. "I boxed them." "You boxed my family?" "They made the house feel old." I quietly carried the grocery bags into the kitchen. She watched me carefully, waiting for an argument. She didn't get one. Instead I asked, "Where are the boxes?" "The garage." I nodded once. "Good." That evening Ryan invited several friends over without asking. Music echoed through the house. Shoes scattered across the entrance. Wine spilled onto my dining table. Someone scratched one of my antique chairs, dragging it across the floor. Victoria walked through the crowd introducing herself. "This is basically our house now." Everyone laughed. I stood at the edge of the room holding a tray of empty glasses. One guest asked me, "And who are you?" Before I answered, Victoria smiled. "She's family." Family. Not homeowner. Not Daniel's wife. Not the woman who had paid every property tax for nearly 2 decades. Just family. I smiled politely.
"I'm Helen."
Nothing more. Around midnight the guests finally left. Ryan collapsed onto the sofa.
Victoria stretched.
"This place really feels like home." Daniel looked exhausted. "Helen." Raised my hand. "It's late." I walked upstairs. Locked the bedroom door. Sat quietly beside the window. Then I opened my laptop. The first document I created was called Evidence. Inside it I wrote, Day 1. Uninvited occupancy. Unauthorized guests. Damage to dining furniture. Removal of personal property. Household labor demands. I attached photographs. Timestamps. Video clips from the security cameras. Copies of every text message Victoria had already sent me in less than 24 hours. Then I opened a second folder. Property documents. Every deed. Every insurance policy. Every trust agreement. Every legal record. Everything my late father had insisted I keep organized. I smiled for the first time that day, because Victoria believed she had already won. She thought kindness meant weakness. She thought patience meant fear. She thought the house belonged to her father. She had absolutely no idea whose name truly controlled every brick, every window, and every inch of the land beneath her feet. And she certainly didn't know that by walking through my front door with 4 suitcases. She had unknowingly walked straight into the biggest mistake of her entire life. Part 2 1,000 words. The invasion accelerated faster than I expected. Within 3 days, Victoria had transformed my quiet home into something that barely resembled the place I had spent 21 years building. The flowers I planted outside the front porch disappeared overnight. She replaced them with expensive decorative pots that clashed with everything around them. "My style is cleaner," she said while admiring the new entrance. Ryan hired movers without asking anyone. They carried in a massive sectional sofa that barely fit through the front door. My antique coffee table was pushed into the basement. "It looked outdated anyway," Victoria commented. Daniel watched from the hallway. He rubbed the back of his neck. Then he walked away. Every time he stayed silent, another piece of our marriage disappeared. The following Saturday, I came downstairs to discover strangers measuring my dining room walls. A man carrying blueprints smiled. "Good morning." I looked at Victoria. "Who are they?"
Interior designers.
"For what?" "We're remodeling." I laughed. "You are what?" She looked confused. "You'll love it." "No." Her smile vanished. "No." I said no. Ryan stepped between us. "Relax. It's only cosmetic. This isn't your house." Victoria crossed her arms. "My father disagrees." I looked directly at Daniel. He stared at the floor. Not one word. The designers packed their equipment and quietly left.
Victoria stormed upstairs.
Half an hour later she returned carrying a folder. She slammed it onto the kitchen counter. "We've already planned everything." Inside were sketches. A new kitchen. A larger master bedroom. A nursery. A home office. My reading room had been converted into a walk-in closet. The guest suite had become a gym. Even my late mother's rose garden was marked for demolition to make space for a swimming pool. I slowly closed the folder. "You've planned your future."
Victoria smiled.
"Exactly. It just doesn't happen to be here." Her face hardened. "You don't get to decide that." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked outside carrying a watering can. As I watered my mother's roses, I noticed Ryan talking on the phone near the driveway. His voice was low. "We sold the condo months ago." He paused. "No, we're not leaving." Another pause. "Victoria says once everything settles down, this place will eventually be ours." I remained behind the hedge until he walked back inside. Then I quietly took out my phone. The security camera mounted above the garage had recorded the entire conversation. I smiled. Evidence. That evening Daniel knocked on my bedroom door. "Helen." "What?" "We need to keep the peace." "I have. They're just trying to start a family." "So they erase mine?" He sighed. "You always make everything complicated." For a long moment neither of us spoke. Finally I asked the question I had avoided for weeks. "Did you invite them permanently?" Daniel hesitated. "They needed somewhere stable." "That's not what I asked." Silence. "Did you promise them this house?" He looked away. "I might have said one day it would be theirs." I nodded slowly. "So you lied." "I didn't think." "No." I interrupted quietly. "You didn't." He left without another word. The next morning Victoria announced a family meeting. She stood at the head of my dining table holding printed schedules. "Starting Monday, we're reorganizing responsibilities." She handed everyone a copy. Ryan, Daniel, myself. Daniel had one responsibility. Take out the trash every Thursday. Ryan was responsible for mowing the lawn twice a month. Victoria would manage household finances. My list covered nearly everything else. Cooking, cleaning, shopping, laundry, pet care, yard work, dusting, ironing, bathroom maintenance, window washing, meal preparation. I looked at her. "You forgot one." "What?" "My resignation." She laughed. "Very funny." I wasn't joking. She folded the paper in half. "If you refuse to help, maybe you should contribute financially instead."
Ich zerrte her.
"I already do." No. She shook her head. Dad pays for everything. I almost smiled. There it was. The assumption that explained everything. Victoria genuinely believed Daniel owned this house. She believed every mortgage payment had come from him. She believed every renovation had been funded by his salary. She believed every legal document carried his name. She couldn't have been more wrong. That afternoon I drove downtown. Not to the grocery store. Not to the bank. I parked in front of the oldest law office in the city. The receptionist immediately recognized me. Mrs. Carter. It's been a long time. It has. A few minutes later, an elderly attorney entered the conference room carrying a thick leather binder. Your father always said this day might come. I hoped he was wrong. So did I. He placed the binder on the table. Inside were documents I had not looked at in years. Trust agreements. Ownership certificates. Letters signed by my father. Every page confirmed the same truth. The property had never belonged to Daniel. Legally, it was held inside a protected family trust established by my parents long before I married. Daniel had been granted the right to live there only as my spouse. Nothing more. He had never owned 1%. He could not transfer it. He could not promise it. He could not inherit it without my consent. And he certainly could not give it to Victoria. The attorney adjusted his glasses. Would you like to activate the protection clause? I looked at the final page. One signature. That was all it would take. If activated, he continued, everyone residing in the property without the trustee's written permission can be legally removed. Picked up the pen. Not yet. Instead I smiled. I think I'll give them one more chance. The attorney nodded knowingly. Sometimes people reveal everything when they believe they've already won. As I walked back toward my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. Don't forget we invited 12 people for dinner tomorrow. Please make your famous roast. And dessert too. I read it twice. Then I looked at the signed trust documents resting inside my briefcase. Victoria thought she was assigning me another chore. She had no idea she had just handed me the perfect opportunity to expose every lie she had built her future upon. #### Part 3 1000 words. The dinner party began at 6. By 6:15 every chair around my dining table was occupied. Victoria floated through the room wearing a designer dress she could barely afford, introducing Ryan as an ambitious entrepreneur and Daniel as the proud owner of the beautiful estate. Then she pointed toward me. And this is Helen. She keeps everything running around here. Several guests smiled politely. One woman whispered, "You're lucky to have someone helping with the house." Victoria grinned. I know. I placed another serving dish on the table without saying a word. Every sentence she spoke became another piece of evidence. Halfway through dinner, one of Ryan's friends admired the house. This place must be worth a fortune. Ryan laughed. It'll stay in the family. Victoria reached over and squeezed his hand. Eventually it'll be ours. Several guests raised their glasses. Congratulations. I quietly poured more wine. No one noticed the tiny recorder sitting beneath the centerpiece. By the end of the evening, I had captured nearly 2 hours of conversations. Every assumption, every false claim, every arrogant promise. Exactly what I needed. The following morning I found contractors unloading lumber into my driveway. What is this? Victoria smiled as if she were doing me a favor. We're building a nursery. No, you're not. The baby's going to need a room someday. You aren't expecting. We're planning ahead. I looked at the foreman. Who hired you? He pointed toward Ryan. Ryan stepped outside holding a clipboard. We already paid the deposit. I asked one simple question. Did either of you receive written permission from the property owner? Victoria laughed. My father gave us permission. I turned toward Daniel. Did you? He swallowed hard. Victoria interrupted. Of course he did. The foreman looked uncomfortable. I just need confirmation before we start. I smiled politely. You'll receive it from the legal owner. The foreman nodded. We'll wait. As the trucks pulled away, Victoria exploded. You embarrassed us. I protected someone from making an expensive mistake. You have no authority. Still smiling, I walked back inside. That afternoon Ryan knocked on my office door. For the first time since moving in, he looked nervous. Can we talk? Of course. He closed the door. I didn't know about the contractors. You hired them. I hired them because Victoria said the house belonged to Daniel. And he hesitated. Doesn't it? Instead of answering, I asked another question. Have you ever seen the deed? No. The mortgage? No. The tax statements? No. The insurance documents? He slowly shook his head. I just believed her. I nodded. Belief isn't ownership. Ryan left looking far less confident than when he entered. Victoria, however, became even more aggressive. By the end of the week, she had replaced every lock on the upstairs bedrooms. Except mine. When I discovered it, she shrugged. It improves security. You changed locks in a house you don't own. She rolled her eyes. Everything has to become an argument with you. No. I replied calmly. Everything becomes evidence. Her smile disappeared. What does that mean? You'll find out. That evening Daniel entered my study carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one beside me. We need to stop fighting. I haven't started. Helen. I have one question. He sighed. Go ahead. How many times have you told Victoria this house belonged to you? His silence answered before his mouth did. More than once. Why? I wanted her to feel secure. So you built her future on a lie. I never thought it would go this far. I looked directly into his eyes. It already has. For the first time in years, Daniel looked genuinely afraid. What are you planning? The truth. He leaned forward. If you love me. I interrupted before he finished. Love doesn't erase betrayal. He left without touching the coffee. Late that night my phone vibrated. The security system had detected movement in the garage. I opened the live camera feed.
Victoria.
Ryan. Flashlights. They were opening storage boxes. One after another. My wedding photographs. Family albums. Old jewelry boxes. Legal file cabinets. Victoria pulled out a folder labeled property records. My heartbeat remained steady. She smiled triumphantly. Finally. Ryan opened the folder. His smile vanished almost immediately. These are blank copies. They can't be. Victoria grabbed the pages. Every important document had been removed months earlier and placed inside my private safe deposit box. Only photocopies remained. Worthless. Ryan looked uneasy. Maybe we should stop. No. She slammed the cabinet shut. There has to be another set. I watched through the camera as they searched for nearly an hour. They never found anything. Because everything that mattered had already been moved. The next morning I pretended nothing had happened. Victoria looked exhausted. Ryan avoided eye contact completely. During breakfast she casually asked, "Do you know where the property papers are?" I buttered my toast. Why? Just curious. I imagine the owner knows exactly where they are. She frowned. Dad. I took a sip of coffee. Did I say Daniel? For the first time since arriving, genuine uncertainty appeared across her face. Ryan slowly lowered his fork. Neither of them spoke for the rest of breakfast. After they left the room my phone rang. It was the attorney. "Mrs. Carter, the notice is ready." "Good. We can serve it whenever you choose." I looked out the dining room window. Victoria was outside, directing landscapers where to remove my mother's rose bushes. She was smiling, laughing, planning a future she believed was guaranteed. I watched for another moment before answering quietly. "Prepare the paperwork. When would you like it delivered?" I smiled. At the exact moment she believes she's finally won. Part 4, 1000 words. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Sunlight poured through the windows while Victoria rushed around the house decorating the living room with fresh flowers and expensive candles. She looked happier than I had seen her since moving in. "Everything has to be perfect," she said. "For what?" She smiled. "We're making an announcement." Ryan forced a smile, but I noticed the tension in his eyes. He had barely spoken to Victoria since the night they searched my garage. Daniel remained unusually quiet. His coffee sat untouched. His hands trembled slightly every time he looked at me. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know when. At exactly 1 o'clock, guests began arriving. Victoria had invited both sides of the family, several close friends, and even a few neighbors. Nearly 30 people filled the house. Laughter echoed through every room. Champagne glasses clinked together. Victoria stood proudly beside the fireplace. She tapped a spoon against her glass. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" The conversations faded. Ryan walked beside her. Daniel stood several feet away, looking increasingly uncomfortable.
Victoria smiled brightly.
"Thank you all for coming today." She reached for Ryan's hand. "We wanted to share 2 exciting pieces of news." The room erupted with applause before she even continued. "First, Ryan and I are expecting to start our family very soon." Everyone cheered. She paused dramatically. "And second," she looked around the room with complete confidence, My father has decided that this house will officially become ours. Applause exploded again. Several guests congratulated Daniel. Someone shouted, "That's an incredible gift." Daniel didn't move. He simply stared at the floor. Victoria continued speaking. "We've already begun planning renovations." She pointed toward the staircase. "The upstairs will become the children's area." She pointed toward my reading room. "That space will become my office." Then she smiled directly at me. "And Helen has generously agreed to help us through the transition." Every pair of eyes turned toward me. I slowly placed my coffee cup onto the table. "No." The room fell silent.
Victoria laughed nervously.
"She's joking." "No." I repeated. "I'm not." Confusion spread across the room. Victoria forced another smile. "Helen." I calmly walked toward the fireplace. "I think everyone deserves to hear the complete story," Daniel whispered. "Please don't." I looked at him. "You had many chances." Then I faced the guests. "How many of you believe Daniel owns this house?" Almost every hand went up. I nodded. "Interesting." I opened a leather folder and removed several documents. Victoria folded her arms confidently. "This is ridiculous." I ignored her. 21 years ago, after my parents passed away, our family estate was transferred into an irrevocable trust. The room became perfectly quiet. My father created that trust long before I married Daniel.
Victoria laughed.
So. I held up the first document. "Daniel has never owned this property." Her smile disappeared. I continued. "He has never paid the mortgage because there has never been one." Another document. "He has never owned the title." Another document. "He has never possessed the legal authority to promise this house to anyone." Ryan slowly turned toward Victoria. "What is she talking about?" Victoria shook her head. "She's lying." Without saying another word, I handed the documents to Ryan. He read the first page. Then the second. His face lost all color. He whispered, "Oh my God." Victoria grabbed the papers from his hands. "No." She flipped through them frantically. "No." Page after page carried official seals, legal signatures, county records, trust certifications. Every document confirmed exactly the same fact. Owner and trustee, Helen Carter. Only. Victoria looked at Daniel. "Dad." Daniel couldn't answer. She grabbed his arm. "Tell them." He closed his eyes. "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" "I never owned the house." The words echoed through the room. Every guest stared in complete disbelief.
Victoria stepped backward.
"You told me." "I know." "You promised me." "I know." "You said everything would be ours." Daniel's voice cracked. "I was wrong." "No."
Victoria screamed.
"You lied." Ryan slowly backed away from both of them. "You knew." Daniel nodded weakly. "I hoped." Ryan interrupted. "You hoped what?" "That Helen would eventually agree." Ryan laughed bitterly. "So our entire future depended on a lie?" Nobody answered. The silence was overwhelming. Then someone knocked on the front door. 3 sharp knocks. Everyone turned. I opened the door. 2 people stood outside. My attorney and a licensed process server. The attorney smiled politely. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Carter." Perfect timing. He entered the living room. The process server removed several envelopes from a leather case. Victoria looked terrified. "What is that?" The attorney spoke calmly. "Formal legal notice." He handed the first envelope to Victoria, the second to Ryan, the third to Daniel. Victoria stared at the words printed across the top. "Notice of unauthorized occupancy." Ryan opened his with shaking hands. Daniel never opened his at all. He already knew what it contained. The attorney continued. "As of today, the trustee has officially withdrawn permission for all unauthorized occupants to remain on the property." Victoria looked at me in disbelief. "You can't do this." "I already have. My father lives here. My husband lives here." "Not anymore." Ryan looked toward the attorney. "Is this legal?" He answered immediately. "Completely." Victoria's breathing became rapid. "We're family." The attorney nodded. "Family relationships do not override property law." She turned back toward me. "You planned this?" "No." I replied quietly. "You planned this the moment you walked into my home believing kindness meant ownership." She looked around desperately. Nobody defended her. Nobody questioned the documents. Nobody challenged the law. For the first time since she arrived with 4 suitcases, Victoria realized she had never been standing in her future home. She had been standing inside someone else's patience. And that patience had finally reached its end. Part 5 1000 words. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The silence inside the living room felt heavier than any argument that had taken place over the past month. Victoria looked from the legal notice to Daniel, then back to me. Finally she whispered, "This isn't happening." The attorney remained calm. "It is." Ryan folded the documents and slowly placed them on the coffee table. "When do we have to leave?" 72 hours, the attorney replied. Victoria shook her head violently. "No, we're not leaving." She marched toward the staircase. "I'm calling my lawyer." The attorney smiled politely. "I encourage you to." She disappeared upstairs, slamming the bedroom door so hard the entire house shook. Ryan remained frozen. He looked at Daniel. "Did you really know all this?" Daniel nodded without lifting his head. "I knew. And you still let us sell our condo?" Daniel covered his face with both hands. "I thought Helen would forgive us." Ryan laughed bitterly. "You gambled our future on hope." No one answered. One by one, the guests quietly gathered their belongings. Some offered awkward apologies. Others simply avoided eye contact. Within 15 minutes, the house that had been full of celebration became almost completely empty. Only 4 of us remained. Victoria stormed downstairs carrying a stack of papers. "My lawyer says Dad is your husband." "Correct. That means he has rights." The attorney extended his hand. "May I?" She reluctantly handed him the papers. He glanced through them for less than 30 seconds. Then he handed them back. "These concern marital status." He pointed toward the trust documents. "This concerns ownership. They're different." Victoria's confidence disappeared again. "There has to be something." "There is." The attorney answered. "You can move." She looked as though she had been slapped. "You can't throw family away." I finally spoke. "I never threw anyone away. I opened my home. I welcomed you. I cooked for you. I cleaned after you. I tolerated insults. I watched you erase my memories from these walls. I gave you every opportunity to treat me with respect. You chose entitlement. Instead." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You wanted this." "No. I wanted honesty." Daniel slowly stood. "Helen." I turned toward him. "I'll leave." His voice was barely audible. "I know. I should have stopped this. You should have." "I'm sorry." For the first time since everything began, I believed he truly meant it. Unfortunately, some apologies arrive long after they can change anything. 3 days later, a moving truck pulled into the driveway. A court officer supervised the process.
Victoria packed silently.
The confidence that had filled every room only days before had vanished. Ryan carried boxes without speaking. Daniel folded his clothes into 2 old suitcases. Before leaving, he paused beside our wedding photograph. One of the few pictures Victoria hadn't managed to throw into storage. He gently touched the frame. "I ruined everything." I didn't disagree. Outside, Ryan walked back toward me. "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything." I believed every word Victoria told me. He looked toward the truck. "I should have asked questions." "We both should have." He nodded. "I've accepted a job in another state. I think starting over is the only thing left. I hope it works out." He smiled sadly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing me the difference between generosity and being taken for granted." He extended his hand. I shook it. Then he climbed into his car and drove away. Victoria remained standing beside the truck. She looked at the house one last time. "I really thought this would be mine." I answered honestly. "It could have been your home. But you wanted ownership instead of gratitude." A single tear rolled down her face. Without another word, she entered the passenger seat. The truck slowly disappeared down the street. Daniel was the last person to leave. He stood at the front door for several moments. "I don't expect forgiveness." I nodded. "Good. But I hope one day." I gently interrupted him. "I hope one day you forgive yourself." He looked surprised. "I already have peace. Now you need to find yours." He picked up his suitcase. For a moment, I saw the man I had fallen in love with decades earlier. Then he walked away. I closed the front door. For the first time in weeks, the house was completely quiet. I walked through every room. I returned my family photographs to their places. I carried my mother's favorite vase back into the living room. Outside, I planted new rose bushes where the old ones had been destroyed. Spring would come again. Flowers always bloom again when they're cared for. Several months later, I hosted another gathering. This time the guests were lifelong friends, neighbors, and people who understood that a home is built on respect, not possession. The laughter sounded different. It sounded genuine. As the evening ended, I stood alone on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of gold. I realized something important. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Others mistake silence for surrender. But true strength is knowing exactly when to stop giving chances to those who never intended to appreciate them. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. And remember this: never allow anyone to convince you that your kindness gives them ownership over your life. Respect is earned. Trust is protected. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is close the door, lock it behind you, and finally choose yourself.